Hey everybody, today's math lesson was 2.4, estimate products. Now we didn't actually want to find the exact product of our numbers that we're multiplying, we wanted to estimate, so we're rounding our numbers. Let's take a look at some of the problems that we worked on in the textbook today. Okay, now the difference between these problems and some of the other problems that we've done before is that they want us to estimate and they want us to find a range of numbers and say, is the answer that they give us in the problem, is it reasonable or not? In order to do that, we're not going to estimate like we've estimated in the past. We're actually going to round up and we're going to round down, no matter what the neighboring number is. So our problem right here is talking about buying horse hay. And each roll of horse hay costs $58. And she says that she will make $174 if she sells 3 rolls. Now, what we need to do is take a look at the 174 and see is that a reasonable estimate or not. So what we're going to do is we're going to set up our multiplication problem. Our multiplication problem for this particular problem would be 3 times 58. Now, we're not actually going to solve that problem. Instead, we're going to round up and we're going to round down to find our range, or like we were talking about today, our top piece of bread and our bottom piece of bread for our grilled cheese sandwich. Okay, so let's take a look at our 58, and we're going to look into the tens place, and we're going to round this number down. Our 5 is going to stay the same, and our 8 is going to turn into 0. This is our low number, or this is our bottom piece of bread for our grilled cheese sandwich. So we talked about yesterday during our lesson that when we're multiplying numbers and we have one that ends in a 0, we can cross out that 0 to make the problem easier for us to comprehend. Now all we have to think about is 3 times 5, which is 15, and then we add our 0 in, so we get 150. When we do our next problem, we're going to round our 5 up. So we still have 3 times, and our 5, we're going to round it up to 6, and our 8 again is going to turn to 0. So we just rounded 58 down to 50 and up to 60 in order to find that range that we're looking for. We set it as equals, and we have to figure out what that equals. So I crossed out my 0 again. 3 times 6 is 18, and then I'm going to add that 0 back in. This one, same thing. I added that 0 back in. All right, now I have to see, is the statement true? She says that she will make $174. Could that be a reasonable amount of money that she makes? Let's see. We're going to set up an inequality. We're going to say $150. Is that less than the number that they give us, 174? Is that less than that? Yes, it is. So that's reasonable. Now we look at our high part, which was $180. And we say, is that greater than the number that they give us, which is 174? Yes, it is. Which means our number 174 falls right in between that range. We have 150, 174, and 180. So we just made our sandwich. Okay, we made our grilled cheese sandwich. We had our low number and our high number, and that 174 fit right in between. So we can now state that yes, her answer is reasonable. Her answer is reasonable because it fits in between my range. Let's take a look at another one. This is another problem that we did today in class. A walking path for horses is 94 feet long. Carlos says that if a horse walks the length of the path 3 times, it will have walked 500 feet. We need to find out, is 500 feet a reasonable answer? So we have 94, and he's walking that path 3 times. So we're going to set up our multiplication problem as 3 times 94. And we're not going to find the actual product yet. Instead, we're going to round up and we're going to round down. We're going to start with rounding down. So 3 times, my 9 is going to stay the same, and it turns into 90. I'm going to cross out that 0, and I get 27, and then I add that 0 back in. 3 times 90 is 270. I'm going to do the same thing. This time I'm going to round up. 3 times My 94, I'm going to round my 9 up to 10, and so my 94 is going to turn into 100 when I round up. I'm going to cross out 2 zeros this time. 3 times 1 is 3, and I add 2 zeros back in, and I get 300. Now I'm going to do the same thing with these numbers. I have to figure out if my number that they give me, 500, is going to fit in between or not. So I look at my number 270, and I say, okay, that's my smaller number. Is 270 less than 500? Yes, it is. This part is true. Now I set up my next one. Is 300, this is going to be my bigger number, or supposed to be my bigger number, it's on the high end of my sandwich, okay? Is this number greater than 500? No, it is not. 300 is smaller than 500. If I was trying to set up my sandwich and I had my bigger number on top, and then I had my middle cheese and my smaller number on bottom, and I tried to set up my sandwich like this, in order from greatest to least, my 500 would actually end up above here, and I would have my pan just filled with melted cheese and wouldn't be in between my two pieces of bread. Okay, so my 500 is too big. It does not fit in the middle of my range. So no, his estimate, or his answer, is not reasonable. It does not fit within my high and my low. It doesn't fit within my range. Okay. Let's take a look at some of the problems from your homework. Now, the first part of your homework just wants you to estimate the product by rounding. This first part, numbers 1 through 8, we're just rounding like normal. Okay? So we're going to round to the nearest thousands place, and we're just going to round like normal. So I look at my neighbor, and he's a 5. My 5 is going to turn my underlined digit, or my thousands place. It's going to make me round up. So I'm going to end up having 5 times 6,000. Now again, I can cross out my zeros. 2, 3. I multiply 5 times 6, and I get 30. And then I add my 3 zeros back in. And that's my answer for number 4. Numbers 1 through 8 are this simple. All you have to do is round to the highest place value you can round to, multiply, and there's your answer. Because all we're asked to do is to estimate the product by rounding. Number 6 is the same way. I'm going to underline my highest place, which is my tens place in this case. I look at my neighbor and it's at 8. My 8 is going to force my 9 to turn into a 10. So 98 is going to round up to 100. I'm going to cross out my zeros. I'm going to multiply 6 times 1, and I get 6, and I add my zeros back in, and my answer is 600. Pretty simple. Now, when I move down to 9 through 12 on your homework, it gets a little bit more complicated. They then ask you to find two numbers the exact answer is between. Okay, this is where we have to start finding our range. For numbers 9 through 12, we have to find that high and that low, or like we talked about in class, the top piece of bread and the bottom piece of bread for your grilled cheese sandwich. Okay, so let's take a look again in my thousands place. I'm going to first start with finding my low, or my bottom piece of bread, and I'm going to multiply 6 times. My 7 is going to stay the same. Everything else is going to turn to zeros. I'm rounding down. Okay, so for now, all I have to do is multiply 6 times 7. I know that 6 times 7 is 42. I cross those 3 zeros out, and then I add them over here. So I have 42,000. Okay, that's the low end. That's my bottom piece of my sandwich. Now I need that top end. So this time I'm going to round up, which means my 7 is going to round up and turn into an 8. So I have 6 times 8,000. Again, I'm going to cross out my 3 zeros. Now all I have to do is 6 times 8. I get 48. And then I add those zeros back in. These are the two numbers that the exact answer is between. So when I end up actually multiplying this and finding my exact product, it will fall in between this low and this high. And I'll have a nice and crispy grilled cheese sandwich. Okay, so my actual product will fall between this. So for numbers 9 through 12, you're finding that high and that low, or the two numbers that the exact answer is between. One more from your homework. This is number 12. Okay? I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to start with my low, which means my 6 is going to stay the same, and everything else is going to turn to zeros. I'm going to multiply. I'm going to cross out my two zeros. 8 times 6 is 48. And then I add two zeros back in, and I get 4,800. I'm going to do the same thing, except this time I'm going to turn my 6 into a 7. I'm going to round it up. I'm going to cross out those two zeros. 7 times 8 is 56. And then I add my two zeros back in. These are the two numbers that the exact answer is between. This is my range. My exact answer will fall right in here somewhere. Okay. Here's one of your word problems from your homework tonight. This is the last one we're going to look at. Okay. We have to set up our problem first, so we have to read it through. Isaac drinks 8 glasses of water each day. He says he will drink 2,920 glasses of water in a year that has 365 days. Is the exact answer reasonable? Explain. In order to do this, we need to find our range. So we have to start with our multiplication problem. This would be the final answer, or the product to our multiplication. So we're not going to worry about that number right this second. What we're going to find is our 8 here and our 365 here. Those are the two numbers we need to be multiplying. So we're going to set up our multiplication problem as 8 times 365. Now again, we're not finding our exact product. Instead, we're rounding up and we're rounding down. So we're going to start by rounding down, which means our 3 is going to stay the same. 8 times 300. Okay, I'm going to cross out those two zeros. 8 times 3 is 24, and then I add my zeros back in, and I have 2,400. Now I'm going to round up. So I'm going to look at my 3, and I'm going to round it up to a 4. So I have 8 times 400. I'm going to cross out my two zeros. 8 times 4 is 32, and I add those two zeros back in. Now, in order for me to identify if the answer that they gave me, or this 2,920, is reasonable or not, I have to see if my 2,920 fits between the two numbers that I just found. So does this number work right here? Let's see. I can order my numbers from least to greatest and see if it'll work. See if it fits into my sandwich. So, if I have my high of 3,200, and then the number that they give me, 2,920, and then the other number that I have, my low, 2,400. And I can say to myself, okay, 3,200, is that greater than 2,920? Well, yes, it is. Then I look at the next one, 2,920. Is that greater than 2,400? Yes, it is. So, the answer that they gave us in our problem is reasonable. So my answer would be yes, it is reasonable. Because 3,200 is greater than the number that they give me, 2,920. And 2,920 is greater than my low part of my range, 2,400. This is why it's reasonable, because my number fits in between my high and my low. It fits inside my range. All right, those are a few of your problems from your homework that I've worked out for you. I hope you guys have a good weekend, and I'll see you on Monday. On Monday, we're actually going to start doing some real 2-digit by 1-digit multiplication. So get excited. I'll see you then.